Prologue. Chapter 1. The Bargain. 19 years ago. She was his first daughter and she would be his last. His Luna was dead, and it was all thanks to the brown-haired, green-eyed so-called bundle of joy that was currently toddling her 1-year-old self across the living room floor. He couldn't look at her without seeing his beloved, a combination of profound love and agonizing pain coursing through his veins. His wife was gone. He'd never hold her again. Their plans for their future were nothing more than unrealizable dreams. He'd been excited when he'd first learned of his Luna's pregnancy. They couldn't wait to meet their baby. The nursery was decorated, the name picked out, everything was set. The only thing left was to give birth. The pain in her eyes would forever be etched in his brain. His Luna fought hard to push their baby into the world. Hours and hours of labor, but she never once complained. She knew it'd all be worth it. But it hadn't been. Not as far as Andres was concerned. The sound of his wife taking her last breath at the same time his daughter took her first was a moment he'd never be able to come to terms with. Instead of celebrating his daughter's arrival, he was cursing it, cursing her. She'd taken his Luna away and he'd never forgive her for that. Too distraught over his wife's death, Andres was no good to his pack. His usual steel persona had been destroyed the moment his Luna succumbed, therefore leaving his pack vulnerable to their enemies. Their most dangerous rival, Alpha Stone of the Blue Crescent Pack, wasted no time planning and successfully executing an attack. The only thing that kept the Sun Pack from being completely destroyed was the deal Stone had offered. By no means had the offer been an exercise in empathy. It had been an act of disdain. What Stone wanted more than Andres' death was his misery. The best way to hurt him, the only way to prevent the total and complete annihilation of the Sun Pack, was to give up the closest thing Andres had left of his beloved. And thus it came to pass. Alpha Andres of the Sun Pack pledged his daughter to the devil himself. Autumn. Present day. Autumn, Nan called. Nan was the mother figure in mine and Dion's life. As I'd been told, when Mother had passed away, Father had been utterly devastated. He hadn't been in the right mind to care for his 2 children, so he'd hired Nan. Up until a few years ago, she was always at our house. Nowadays, she still often came around to spend time with Dion and me. I felt as though she still hadn't come to terms with the fact that Dion and I weren't kids anymore, so she was always making excuses to come by and nag us about being cleaner, smarter, etc. But most of the time, Dion wasn't even home. He was constantly away on important missions to different places and whatnot, while Father was always busy with taking care of the pack. So I was alone most of the time, with only a few people and books to keep me company. Every once in a while, I wondered how it would feel to have a mother. Maybe I wouldn't be as lonely as I am now if she was with me. Maybe Father wouldn't treat me like I was a heavy weight on his shoulders. Mother's dying wish was that I would grow up to be a kind and strong woman, and I did. I was like her, except I severely lacked her grace and softness. I snorted with annoyance, because in reality, who needed those traits anyway? Yeah, a Luna, but thank God I was never going to be one since Dion was older than me. He'd be Alpha of our Sun Pack after Father decided to retire. Shaking those thoughts out of my head, I replied to Nan. Yes? I need you to be downstairs in 30 minutes. I yelled back an okay, and she continued to cook her favorite recipe, some type of Chinese meal we always enjoyed. Today was one of the handful of days a year when we'd have a meal together as a family. Father said he had something important to tell me, something that had to do with my 20th birthday coming up. My curiosity levels were at their peak. Maybe he wanted to buy me my own place so I could finally get out of his life. My imagination ran further away from reality as I thought about starting a new life, away from this pack and the nothingness I felt here. That would be not only my dream, but also Father's. He saw me as a burden. He'd probably been praying that I'd be gone soon, most likely after my 20th. 20th birthdays are special for us werewolves because we're able to feel our mating bond on that day. That is, only if both parties are of age. Like every other girl, I was excited, but not as much as my best friend Rin. She couldn't stop talking about whether her mate would look like Shawn Mendes, whereas I was more of an Austin Butler kind of girl. I wondered where I'd live after I found my mate. Our current house was big. Granted, my father was the alpha. I found it completely unnecessary how we had 10 rooms and 3 floors. A built-in garden was a part of our rooftop, but I spent most of my time in the library or the pack's training room. Like a lot of the other girls in our pack, I knew how to defend myself and trained some days out of the week. I wished I was as good as some of the female trainers in our pack. After a few grueling training sessions with them, I realized I still had a long way to go. But I was sure of one thing. I wasn't going to rely on a male to protect me when I was more than capable of doing so myself. I shook off any feelings of anxiety and grabbed my favorite book off the bookshelf. Reading was my stress reliever. It helped me escape from my boring life and delve into a world that I wished existed. Right now, I was in the middle of rereading A Court of Thorns and Roses. Dion would always make fun of my obsession with this book because, oh God, I was completely and utterly in love with Rhysand. I looked over at the time and almost jumped out of my skin from anxiety. It was 8 p.m. and I was late to dinner. I could have sworn I'd only been reading for a few minutes. I jumped out of bed and stepped quickly down the stairs, afraid I would anger Father by being tardy. I stopped dead at the somber faces of my father and Dion. Dion was always laughing and cracking jokes, so the situation seemed rather odd to me. Father, on the other hand, was constantly serious and would only give me one-word answers. My heart thudded rapidly in my chest. I had a feeling I was about to receive news I would not like. "What's wrong? What happened?" I asked in a rush, my tongue feeling awfully heavy in my suddenly dry mouth. "Nothing. Come sit," was the gruff response I got from Father. As always, he didn't make eye contact with me. I'd gotten used to this behavior, so it didn't bother me as much now. My instincts told me something was very wrong. Still, I cautiously made my way to the dinner table. The tension in the air was thick, but I knew Father would speak when he decided it was the right time. Halfway through dinner, Dion mouthed the word sorry to me with a look of pity on his face. My confusion only grew. I pushed my food around my plate, and the bites that I had previously taken felt like heavy stones in my belly. Finally, Father spoke. His words left me speechless. The little part of me that hoped my father's love for me still existed was crushed. "You will go live with the Blue Crescent Pack in 2 days. The duration of your stay will be 1 year, so start packing your bags. There's a 15-hour flight you will take to get there. Just know, I will not budge on this." Download the Galatea app to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description. Autumn. Chapter 2. The Mystery Guy. 2 days? A year? My head spun as I knocked back my chair. The noise echoed through the house. I ran up the stairs and nobody made a move to follow me. I had to leave in 2 days? That was 5 days before my birthday. My heart thundered in my chest and I felt a need to throw up the little food I had managed to force down. Suddenly, I realized that this was done on purpose. Father was afraid I would find my mate here, and then he would have never let me go. My anger intensified threefold. I clenched my fists to avoid going downstairs and doing something I'd severely regret later. And why was Father making the whole thing sound as though it was a short school trip? This was so wrong. My whole life, I'd never defied my father. I was the good girl, and Dion always teased me about it. But no matter what I did, Dion was still Father's favorite. Father knew I loved my people and I'd give my life for them. He knew I would not say no to this. So what was 1 year to me? Nothing. It was nothing. But it was the fact that he had decided to keep it a secret from me up until now that boiled my blood. My mind spun, conjuring up ways to defy Father. I knew he didn't care what I did as long as it didn't hurt his reputation. I think it was finally my turn to do what I wanted. Consequences be damned. I'd get wasted and dance the night away. Hopefully someone close to father would be a witness to me doing so. I'd show him what I can really do. Maybe I'd spend the other 2 nights the same way. Grabbing my phone, I speed-dialed Rin. "Babe, what's up?" "I'll explain everything later, but I want to take you up on that offer." For years, Rin had been out partying late with new guys every day. She'd been begging me to come with her, but I'd abstained. Being the alpha's daughter, I'd assumed that type of behavior wasn't appropriate. But that would surely change. I was going to take full advantage of the 2 days I had left. I knew that I was acting like an immature child, but I was tired of being neglected. Father was never home to see what I was up to. I was the backup child, the useless one, until now. He was only forced to need me for this, while Dion was everything my father ever wanted in a child. Over the last few years, he seemed to meld more and more into the mold father had set out for him. This terrified me, but I knew Dion could never be as heartless. Whenever he'd come home, we'd spend every second together to make up for the time apart. Though now, we weren't as close as we used to be. Many things changed as time went by, including our relationship. Rin's vivacious squeal at the other end of the line brought me out of my melancholy thoughts. "Be at my house in 10, she screamed into the phone before hanging up. I ran swiftly down the stairs before father confronted me for my behavior. I heard Dion call my name, but I didn't want to deal with him either. I let my wolf take control as I stepped out. My senses immediately sharpened, and I gasped in a deep breath of clean air through my snout. Dead leaves flew around. The weather had gotten colder recently, much to my dismay. I did appreciate the fact that I couldn't feel the frigid wind as much due to my layers of fur. Unlike Dion, who preferred his wolf form over human, I appreciated them both for their unique qualities. Stretching my limbs out, I made my way to Rin's house. Air whipped around my body as I tore through the woods. 5 minutes later, I was at her door, which was left unlocked for me. I noticed Rin's mom sitting in the living room once I walked inside. She was my absolute favorite. No denying, I thought of her as my own mom because of how much time I spent with her and Rin. We'd basically grown up together, meeting the first time in 2nd grade. "Autumn, baby, how are you?" Rin's upstairs in her room. "Great, Mrs. Rock. Thank you," I said with fake enthusiasm I'd mustered from deep inside myself. A few seconds later, I burst into Rin's room. "I'm in the bathroom," I heard her say in a muffled voice. I shook my head at the mess of clothes in her room. Sexy heels hung on her bedpost and hangers littered the floor. Picking up the dress on top of the pile of clothes on her bed, I held it up to myself and snorted. This would definitely get father's attention. The dress was a dark maroon, and it barely made it halfway down my thighs. My legs looked like they stretched on for miles, even longer than they usually looked with my 5'9" height. The back of the dress dipped down to the bottom of my spine, and I shivered at the thought of going outside with this on. I'd never worn something this revealing in my life, but I knew it was more than perfect. Rin made her way out of the bathroom and gasped when she saw me. "I knew that was going to be the one, babe. Go put it on and then I'll work on your makeup." God, who knew she would be this excited to finally take me to the club again? If I'd known, I would have agreed to join her sooner. In the bathroom, I stripped down and put on the dress. It smoothly slid over my head and the material clung to every part of my toned body. Whereas Rin was all curves, I was more on the muscular side. Although lately I'd decreased my training time and started eating more fatty foods. That's why I could see Rin-like curves forming. I had to say, I was loving them. As I stared at myself in the mirror, I marveled at how much I looked like my mother. Though I'd only seen her in pictures, the resemblance was uncanny. I had almost all her features: straight brown hair, beautiful eyebrows, her nose, and mouth. Except for my green eyes, which were from father. Right now, they reflected how I felt: disoriented, broken. They churned with pain and determination, but mostly uncertainty. I clenched my jaw to prevent breaking down right there. Rin screaming at me to hurry up broke my chain of thoughts. I opened the bathroom and she squealed dramatically. Rolling my eyes, I made my way to her. My best friend was the biggest drama queen and I loved her for it. She brought light into my life, light I definitely needed. Autumn, hurry and sit. Rin pulled out various makeup products and I started to talk. As the words tumbled out of my mouth, tears threatened to spill out. I wasn't one to cry, but I'd been holding it in for so long. Not having family around to love you was the worst feeling ever. I constantly felt lonely, but I never let Rin or Nan see it. A sob made its way through me, but Rin wasn't having any of it. Oh, hell no. You'd better not cry. I've worked so damn hard on your makeup, you look even hotter than me, and you know how near impossible that is. A laugh spilled out of my mouth. Just like that, she'd made me feel better. I loved this girl. Okay, babe, you can look in the mirror now, Rin said with excitement in her voice. I slowly turned around and was astonished at the person I saw staring back at me. I did do my makeup every once in a while, but Rin had really worked her magic. My lips popped out against my pale skin tone. They were a deep maroon, matching my dress. The smoky eye and fake lashes combination had me looking like a dangerous mystery. Wow. Thank you, I managed to choke out. I didn't do anything, babe. I just took your beautiful features and enhanced them, she replied. Now let's go and get drunk, baby. We slipped on oversized jackets to block out the cold and rushed down the stairs, saying goodbye to Mrs. Rock on the way. There was a special club for elites around 20 minutes away. I had VIP passes due to being the alpha's daughter. I didn't like the special treatment and attention, but tonight I knew it would work in my favor. Someone would definitely tell father about what I'd been up to tonight, and I'd very much enjoy his reaction. Stepping out, we shook off the jackets. I already felt the wind biting into my skin. Still, I walked to the front of the line, not regretting my decision one bit. We already had people turning their heads because who wouldn't recognize my green eyes? They were special, running in the family. The bouncers nodded their heads at us and let us inside, pushing others aside to give us space. The smell of sweat and perfume intermingled, hitting me square in the face. The music was so loud that the floor vibrated, and beautiful neon lights flashed around as barely dressed girls danced on the tiny stages. My eyes lingered on the couples in the club, causing my heart to clench out of jealousy. I ignored the odd feeling. I wasn't here to pity myself. I was here to relish in a night of non-mated males and strong drinks. A waiter with a bunch of shot glasses came by. He nodded his head at us and extended his arm to offer us some. Rin and I each grabbed two. I downed one and then the other. The smooth liquid burning my throat felt amazing. It had been too long. Downing one more, I dragged Rin to the dance floor. Bodies rubbed against us as we made our way to the middle. I danced with Rin until my body was covered with a thin layer of sweat, allowing the almost deafening music to take hold of me. She winked at me and moved toward a good-looking guy who had been eyeing her for the last hour. The drinks had definitely kicked in as I felt my limbs loosen and my mind relax. As I made a move to grab another shot, two warm hands grabbed my waist and pulled me back against a very muscular front. I stumbled a bit before he tightened his grip on me, making sure I didn't fall. He slowly caressed the side of my bare back with his thumbs. It felt phenomenal. My hands automatically moved back onto his head. I was surprised at the length my hands had to reach in order to run my fingers through his silky hair. My brain took a while to figure out that the man was tall. Very tall. I hadn't had male contact in a while, and it was exactly what I needed to forget my troubles. I lazily moved my hands out of his hair and into the air while swaying my hips and grinding against him. A low groan emitted from his throat, causing me to flush. He continued to run his hands slowly down the sides of my body. A shudder ran through me. My body felt like it was burning. The mysterious guy planted soft kisses on my neck, and I tilted my head to give him more access. I felt him smiling against my neck. Curiosity made me twist my neck to catch a glance at the man making me feel this way. When I saw his face, I held back a gasp. Download the Galatea app to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description. Autumn. Chapter 3. Coward. He was hands down the most attractive male I had ever laid my eyes on. He towered over me. His aura marked him as someone of power. It compelled people to stop and stare at him. I couldn't blame them, though, because that was exactly what I was doing. Mr. Dark and Brooding's curly raven hair looked like it was originally gelled to the side, but it now ran in many directions. I felt myself flush again as I realized that it was my doing. This behavior was so unlike me. This man was affecting me in a bizarre way, and I didn't know what to do about it. My eyes flitted over his perfect facial features. I wasn't sure if the shots were doing this to my thoughts, but I swear he looked like an angel as the neon lights flashed over his chiseled face. I finally brought my survey to an end with his eyes. His pupils were so dilated I couldn't tell their color. His sharp jawline clenched as I ran my hand down his thin button-down, opening the first few buttons to reveal a well-muscled and tan chest that confirmed my suspicions that he spent a generous amount of time in the gym. My heart jumped a beat as he pulled me flush against his body and continued to assault my neck with hot kisses. Suddenly, he stopped, just to bring his warm breath and soft lips to my ear. I could feel people stopping their dancing when they realized who I was. Like what you see. His voice was low, husky, causing a wave of heat to hit my body and pool in between my legs. And yes, I found it pathetic how only his voice got me clenching my thighs together. I persuaded myself that what I'd do next was to disobey my father, but I knew better. I roughly grabbed his collar. His eyes slightly widened as he predicted my next move. I smashed my lips against his and he instantly responded, slightly nudging my mouth open with his tongue. I gladly let him in. His mouth was so soft as I imagined it would be a few minutes ago. He grasped my waist tightly and tilted his head to get a deeper grip on my lips. Involuntarily, a moan slipped out of me, and I felt him smiling against my lips, proving that he'd heard me. I heard hushed whispers around me and knew that father would be informed about my behavior soon. Then all of a sudden, a drunken voice rang out in the air. "Hey, that's the alpha's daughter kissing." The rest of his statement was muffled. Abruptly, he pulled back. I saw something flash in his eyes and suddenly he was gone, leaving me very lonely and confused. A circle had formed around me. Before anything else happened, Rin grabbed my arm and pulled me out of the crowd. The cool breeze blew against my skin. I searched the parking lot for the guy who'd left me all hot and bothered. My thoughts were all over the place. What the hell had just happened? Did he run away from me because I was the alpha's daughter? Shouldn't he have done the absolute opposite if he wanted more power? Rin's voice cut off my thoughts. "What just happened, and where did that hottie go that you were kissing?" she questioned, just as confused as me. Feeling defeated? I shrugged my shoulders. I had no answers for her. All I had were my own rapidly increasing number of questions. She let it go and called her mom to pick us up. We both knew we were too drunk to drive. The next hour went by in a blur as I cleaned myself up at Rin's house, changing into a pair of fuzzy pajamas I kept at her house. Rin's mom dropped me off, making sure I was stable enough to walk in without doing any damage to myself. Stepping inside, I ignored father's instant bellowing lecture. I trudged up the stairs and fell into bed. The last thing I heard father say before I fell into a deep sleep left my mind spinning. "You're leaving for the Blue Crescent Pact tomorrow as punishment for tonight's behavior. Download the Galatea app to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description."
Raven. Chapter 4, Mr. Dark and Broody. "Raven, what the fuck just happened?" My best friend in Beta yelled to me as we sped away in my Audi. I'd chosen this car, one of the least expensive ones I owned, to keep a low profile. Obviously, things were not going the way I thought they would. "That girl I kissed, she was Alpha Andres' daughter," I grumbled, disappointed at my stupidity. "Fuck," was Dylan's only answer. I agreed. As Alpha of the Blue Crescent Pack, I was left to deal with my father's problems after he died. Alpha. It was a title I was given at an early age. I was 22, to be exact. I'm now 25, and 3 years of experience as an alpha of one of the strongest packs was enough for me to realize that I was cut out for this job. It kept my head in the right place, away from the dark thoughts that threatened to take control every once in a while. The deal with the Sun Pack was one I'd recently been informed of. I discerned that I'd just made that deal way more complicated than it ever should have been by kissing his daughter. But why was it that I couldn't stop thinking about the girl's soft skin, dark-colored lips, or vibrant green eyes? Her moan played over and over again in my head, something I never wanted to admit to myself, much less to Dylan. He and I both knew I didn't want to bring the girl home before tonight. Matters were paradoxical, and I'd just made things worse. Mother was excited to have her with us, so I knew I'd be seeing her here and there, but other than that, I was going to stay far away. I still didn't understand why Father asked for this girl when there were so many other favors he could have pulled. Maybe he'd wanted her as his own mistress. It sounded like something he'd do. I let out a deep breath and recounted my meeting with Alpha Andres, picking out any suspicious underlying messages. 10 hours ago, Alpha Andres, it is not necessary for us to go through with the bargain Father set. We both know he is alive no longer, and your daughter will be safer in her own pack. Since you've mentioned that it's her birthday soon, she might even find her mate here. I do not think he would be very happy when he finds out she was taken to another pack, 15 hours away with an unmated male wolf. Raven. His voice held no compromise, but I was stubborn. I would not be leaving with the girl. You will take her to your homeland. I do not make these bargains without having the intent to fulfill them, he finished off. A sudden thought invaded my brain and I struggled to let it go. I could get any man to do what I wanted, a skill I was fully confident of, and I knew that if I pushed it a little more, Alpha Andres would let me leave. But something was very wrong with this situation. No father would want to send their daughter away like this. He reminded me of my own father, and I wondered if she was even happy here, whether she was even safe. Was her father treating her well? With those thoughts, I begrudgingly agreed to take her. She shouldn't be a burden. I'd stay away, prevent myself from bonding with her. She'd be gone in a year anyway. You have the same flight as her, so you three will be leaving together. I got her seats switched to be in a row aligned with yours, Alpha Andres said, finishing off our meeting. I didn't argue with him. There was no use. I'd made up my mind. I turned to look back at Alpha Andres one more time, deciphering whether I'd just made a mistake or not. Suddenly, not being able to take it anymore, I called out a question that had been nagging me. What's her name? Autumn. An involuntary shiver went down my body. I knew my beta had caught it. He said nothing. Present. I'd come to the club to get drunk and had left almost sober. One shot didn't come close to how many I usually had in a night. The girl still hadn't left my mind. From what I'd seen today, she looked healthy except for the agony in her eyes. It was overwhelming, and I'd had the sudden urge to erase all her pain, to take it for myself if I had to. A phone ringing jerked me out of the trance she'd left me in. It was Alpha Andres calling. What did he want now? Clearing my throat, I picked up my phone. Change your flights to tomorrow. My daughter needs to be taught a lesson after tonight, he said right away. Giving me no time to respond, he hung up. His daughter, Autumn. The girl I'd so passionately kissed tonight. I guess we're going home tomorrow, I yelled to Dylan over the wind tearing through the windows, ignoring the stupid butterflies in my stomach. He let out a whoop. Surprisingly, I didn't feel the same way. My gut told me something was bound to go wrong.
Download the Galatea app to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description. Autumn. Chapter 5. Leaving it all behind. I woke up to a hangover. An hour passed by in the blink of an eye, and all I managed to do was lie in bed and contemplate going rogue. Obviously, I wasn't going to do it, but I wondered what an adventure it would be. Would I be that one rogue who'd meet her perfect mate in the woods? A mate that would lure her away to a life of happiness and love? Dreams, I reminded myself. Those were only dreams. I couldn't help but sigh at the thought of Mr. Dark and broody from yesterday. There was something about him that was different from all the guys I'd met, other than the fact that he ditched me the moment he found out my identity. It seemed as though he was a prisoner, stuck in a world that was toxic. Like a poison, it was killing him slowly, contaminating a different part of him as each day passed. Maybe the attraction I felt was so intense because I saw a bit of myself in him. I remembered his gentle demeanor, his hands doing wonders to my skin. Dion doing his signature knock on my door brought me back to reality. "Autumn?" I replied back with a muffled, "Yes." "I'm so sorry. I swear I tried to talk him out of it," Dion said with a pained expression on his face. I knew he had nothing to do with it. He didn't have a choice in the matter. My anger had gone down significantly from last night. Now I was just tired. My energy was drained. Yet a sort of excitement had begun building up inside me at the thought of a new place, a new life. Yeah, Dion, I know you love me," I said as I ruffled his hair with a laugh when he gave me the "I'm the older brother" look. "I know how you can make it up to me, though," I continued slyly. His face brightened. "Pack my things." His face fell, but I knew he'd do it for me. Without giving him a chance to complain, I jumped out of bed. Maybe this trip was exactly what I needed. Maybe I'd find my mate there and never have to come back home to this lonely place. Maybe if I had to come back, I'd buy a house with Rin here. But all these tempting thoughts were fantasies, and deep down, I knew it. "I'm going out to get the things I need. I'll see you when I get back. Oh, and when's the flight?" 11 p.m. Dion still made minimal amounts of eye contact with me. It was odd, but I didn't push it. Good, then I have 8 hours. Anyone could clearly hear the fake eagerness in my voice. I understood that nothing could be done about the situation, so I forced myself to accept it. I was leaving, whether I wanted to or not. Calling Rin, I informed her about the new circumstances. She giddily agreed to go shopping with me. "I need a revealing outfit for the plane ride," I said as we walked into the mall. This was the last thing I needed to piss Father off. It was the cherry on top of a mouth-watering sundae that I was tempted to smash into Father's face. Yes, I was being crude. Did I care? No. That was all Rin had to hear before she dragged me away to the section of bralettes in Victoria's Secret. She picked out a beautiful white one that covered a little more than most of the others in the store, but she made sure it was still racy. I nodded my confirmation. After buying that, we hopped over to a few other stores to find me regular clothes. We found the perfect pair of black high-waisted jean shorts to go with my bralette, and I knew Father would be furious. I also knew he would not tell me to change in front of the strangers I was leaving with. His ego was bigger than that of a dozen average males. "I still can't believe I won't see you for a year. Who's going to be my best friend until then? Who am I going to talk about hot guys to?" whined Rin with a pout on her face. A blanket of sadness fell over me as I realized that I wouldn't be seeing Rin every day. She was the only one I'd miss other than Dion. "I'll FaceTime you whenever I have time, Rin. You know your family. Maybe I can even hook you up with a guy there," I said with a wink. She squealed a yes and hugged me before we left for her house. The heaviness in my heart seemed to lift a little as Rin grabbed my hand and we continued our playful banter. Me 8 hours with Rin flew by, and next thing I knew we had reached my house. Rin said she'd drive back home after I'd left for the Blue Crescent pack. I was relieved to have her by my side. Dion was gulping orange juice out of the bottle when we walked in. I shook my head, thinking about how Nan would have gotten so mad if she were here right now. "Hey, Autumn, Rin," he said, tipping his head down in acknowledgement. "I finished your packing. There are 2 suitcases in the living room right now. You probably need a carry-on, though." "Thanks, Dion," I said tiredly. I felt emotionally drained, but was glad he'd taken care of that for me. "Raven and his friend Dylan will be here for you in 10 minutes, mentioned Dion right before we turned away. Raven? That was an interesting name. Kind of hot, if you ask me. With a sigh, I followed Rin to my room and went straight into the bathroom to change. There was no time to waste. I stripped naked and slipped on the bralette with jean shorts. Glancing at myself in the mirror, I had to admit that I looked great. My toned legs, stomach, and back were on full display. Father had never seen me in something this scandalous, and I knew it would do the trick of pissing him off. Right as I walked out, Rin whipped out a makeup bag from her purse. "Hot damn, girl, you look good," she yelled. "You're missing one tiny detail, though," she said with an animated look on her face. Oh God, what did she have planned this time? She pulled out a blood-red lipstick, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding in. She tossed it to me and applied the color, leaving the rest of my face makeup-free. Rin whistled when I turned around. The red really was a nice touch. Rin had tears in her eyes as I reached my arms out to hug her. I had to admit that I was tearing up too. How could I not? I'd spent almost every day with this girl since kindergarten. "God, please don't forget about me. I love you," she said as tears ran down her face. I wiped them away and she did the same to me. "I love you too, Rin. I'll see you soon. No need to be so melodramatic. A year will go by fast and maybe you'll find your mate. You two will be busy with so many great things, you won't even remember me," I said with a wink. She let out a loud laugh and lightly pinched my stomach. That was some weird thing we did to each other ever since we were kids. Walking down the stairs, I could hear young male voices. 2 men stood in the living room. I didn't forget to notice how muscular their backs were. I shook off the inappropriate thoughts. I guess they were the ones to take me to the Blue Crescent Pack. Father stood across from them, his face to me. He stopped talking when he saw me, and I could instantly feel the rage coming off him at my choice of attire. I knew his patience was stretched thin. What could he do, though? I made a point to ignore him. That was when the 2 men turned around to look at me. I surveyed the one on the left from head to toe, seeming to intimidate him with my icy glare. I turned to do the same to the second when I froze. It was him. The one from the club. I schooled my face into indifference, hoping none of them caught my shock. He looked me up and down, and I felt my body flush from the unanticipated attention. Mr. Dark and broody. "What?" he quietly snarled. Damn it, I guess I'd said that out loud. I was going to make this hard for him. I knew it was wrong to let my anger off on him, but if he was going to act all high and mighty after leaving me at the club like that, I was bound to get him back. I gave him a small laugh. "Sorry, babe, you don't intimidate me." I heard him growl. Not going to lie, it was sexy as hell. "What? Are we just going to stand here and glare at each other? Seems rather childish to me," I continued, just to piss them off. The other guy smirked, winking at Rin, who was behind me this whole time. He was rather handsome too, but he wasn't my type, with the blonde hair, blue eyes, and arrogance. I was more of a black hair, dark eyes kind of girl. I gave Rin one last hug and Dion was nowhere to be seen. Had he left without saying goodbye? My heart hurt, but I held my head up high as I turned around to walk out of the house, letting the men see the intricate threading of a rose on the back of my shorts and my bare back. I cracked a smile when I heard someone awkwardly cough after my exit. It was most likely the blonde preventing himself from bursting out laughing in a serious situation. I heard Father say something that boiled my blood. For the first time in my life, I was eminently afraid of him. "You will not live to see another year if you act like you have the past few days. I've been keeping you fed and protected in my house, but after today, that is no longer. One day, someone will get a hold of you and squash that little attitude of yours if you do not learn to control it." I tried not to let his words bother me, but we both know they did. I didn't plan on saying anything, but Mr. Dark and broody apparently did. I will not tolerate any threats to her. She is now under my wing and will be for the next year. Any threats to her will be considered threats to my own life. Am I making myself clear? He said with a menacing expression on his face. Father said nothing. Surprisingly, his words calmed me. I wondered who this man was to make Father shut up so fast. I felt more safe leaving with these two than I would if I stayed at home right now. I felt bad for treating him the way I had, but I figured he'd get over it. Mr. Dark and Broody carried my luggage out to his car, his arm and back muscles flexing at the weight. He had a nice body, and the way that white t-shirt clung to him had me swooning. I know I shouldn't, but I used them as a distraction to forget about the horrible situation I was in. Father always needed the last word, and before I closed the door to the car, he called out, "Just wait until you're back, Autumn. There will be no Raven to save you." I slammed the door shut and closed my eyes to compose myself. "I won't let him harm you," Raven promised. My eyes snapped open, and I looked into his eyes for the first time since that night. His dark blue irises swirled with an emotion, one I couldn't exactly decipher at the moment. But with every ounce of my being, I knew he meant what he had said. Download the Galatea app to get access to hundreds of romance books and audiobooks. Link in the description.